Hello, my name is Emmy DeGrappa. Each week, we bring you stories asking our guests the question why. We learn about passion, purpose, and the human experience. Brought to you by Wyoming Humanities with the generous support of the Wyoming Community Foundation. This is What's Your Why? Today, we are talking to artist Bronwyn Minton. She is a multi-disciplinary artist and educator. Welcome, Bronwyn.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Well, thanks for joining me. I'm really excited to talk to you and learn more about your art and your journey. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in southern Vermont and southern New Hampshire, but I started coming to Wyoming when I was 10 years old to go to camp in Pinedale with horses and pack trips. And it was an amazing, amazing experience. I ended up coming back as a camper, and then I worked for the people. And my mom had worked for the same rancher when she was 20 for a couple of summers. And so I had been hearing about Wyoming my whole life.
I think that is so cool, actually. It's like a family legacy that you started coming out to Wyoming and your mom already had this great love and it just became part of your life.
It is. It's wonderful to think about. And I still am friends with people that I worked with and that owned the place in Pinedale. And so it feels, and a lot of the people that I worked with and also was maybe their camp counselor or that sort of thing still live there and visit. So it feels, still very strong.
So when did your love and passion and journey to become a professional artist start?
So I can't really remember not making things. My parents are both very creative, and I was always encouraged before I can remember to be using my hands to make things in all different ways through art and through craft. I also have, my mom's a really good writer and my dad is an artist and they're both educators. So it feels like I was very encouraged to, be an educator and an artist from a very early age.
So you're really influenced by your parents and your family. And what do you think about when I say professional artist? Because like you said, you can't remember a time when you weren't drawing and creating and doing the artistic things. And I think all children start out that way. And probably as an educator, you have some ideas and philosophies about that. And I want you to share that with us.
Yeah, I do. I think it is, there sort of are maybe a couple different parts to that question. Yeah, one, as an educator and child of educators, I do feel like there is a funny little spot in people's lives where they have been really creative and then something happens where maybe they don't feel like they can draw something realistically, or they have a concept of how things should be when you're making things, or they have some kind of teacher that doesn't encourage that. I really believe that people are not born genius artists or anything else. I think it has to do with anything anybody does in their life. I think it has to do with obsession. So if you really love something and want to do it, you're going to do it more and more and more. And then the more you practice, the better you'll get at it. So I feel like anybody could draw or make things or think about making artwork, but unless they really are obsessed with doing it and learning it, and then they're going to be obsessed with something else and be really good at that. And in terms of, being a professional artist, I feel like there are, especially now, so many different ways of being creative with people, collaborating, making your own work. There are, I think, different levels of the way people think about success or being a professional. And it really is now, I think, an individual path to how people feel like they are doing what they should be doing and they're doing it the way they want to be doing it.
I like your answer because it kind of draws me to ask you to describe your art and why you chose to be a multidisciplinary artist and what that means.
So my work is and has been for most of my life been tied to how we as humans interact with the natural world. For me, it's taken all different kinds of forms, and I use a bunch of different mediums in my work depending on how I want to express that idea. So sometimes my work I use a bunch of different things to come up with how I want to express myself and communicate with people through images or sculpture, 3-dimensional, 2-dimensional, sometimes video, using scientific observation or physical involvement or cultural experience. And I use simple forms that are derived from nature, shadows, texture, shapes, and many different medias, clay, wood, paper, as I said before, sometimes animation. And my work sort of ranges from very microscopic to monumental. So I really try to play with scale. And what I'm trying to do is think about how humans fit into and also construct nature, because we've been doing it for thousands of years. So that is what I have been working, the themes that I work with all the time and revolve to. And sometimes it's pretty realistic drawings, but other times it's an installation that evokes some sort of visual or physical feeling.
So being a multidisciplinary artist, what is the medium? Are you working with wood? Are you working with metal? Or is it a combination of things that you work with? And what's been your journey in terms of learning different mediums to do your expression?
Yes. Sometimes it is wood. Sometimes it's clay. Sometimes it's paper. Sometimes it's wax. I have forever been very curious about learning new things. And I feel like my whole education in undergrad and in grad school was really about problem solving. That's how I approach thinking about making things. And so I'm very, very curious about different mediums. I love to learn to use different kinds of things. And then sometimes also the medium helps me think about how I'm expressing those ideas that I was mentioning a little bit earlier. So I think I have a huge curiosity for different kinds of things that artists use to make things. So I think that's why it's multidisciplinary, because which is my own personal, that's how I go about making things, is being curious about metal, about clay, about different mediums, and then it sort of goes from there. I like to learn new things. I also like to teach myself new things, which keeps it going.
So in this exhibition, which I think is really great to feature women in the arts, and a lot of times what I've learned is that throughout history, women have not been featured in the arts, and why this museum, this National Museum of Women in the Arts, is so exemplary of how women are emerging as artists. And what has been your take on women in the arts in terms of being out there and what's been portrayed throughout history?
Yeah, it is very interesting. I've been a student of art history and a woman artist. And, I think back to how I was taught art history, and probably, I could name or at least conjure images of the women that I was taught, in undergrad and grad as artists. Probably more women were being recognized when I was going through grad school, and more are now. But it just is really fascinating, the percentages, and I don't have them on the top of my head right now, of how many women are actually known and shown in galleries and in museums and collected by people. And it's not a very good percentage. So it feels really, really wonderful that there is a museum that is trying to tip that a little, some, and bring, some of those statistics to our awareness and show contemporary and historical women's work, because I do think we need as many voices as possible culturally so that we can be empathetic and understand each other. And if we have, one point of view, it's not quite as equal or interesting.
Well, that's true. And that's what I love about art, is that you have multiple perspectives, no matter what your cultural background is, your political differences are. You can kind of cross barriers with art and have your own self-expression. So when people look at your art, is there any certain message that you convey or that you want people to walk away with and go, oh, I get it, or I know what she's saying in that art piece?
So most of my work is derived from an idea and from how we interact with the natural world, but it is the work that I feel sort of does its best job is it's not really abstract, but it is going towards something that is open and openly would be open so that people can have their own reaction and own interpretation coming from what they're looking at. I want people to be able to get a visual feeling, some kind of physical feeling when they're looking. I'm looking at a piece of mine right now that uses magnifying glasses. And so I want people to be able to think about their physicalness and then also have some kind of reaction and idea about how we interact with and fit into the natural world.
I think that's great that you kind of leave it open to each person's interpretation of what you create. Some artists don't do that. I mean, they want to have a very certain message, when they create a piece of work. They want to have some way and
I think, if we were going towards a message, I would want it to be some kind of feeling of connectedness, some kind of feeling of maybe awe or, oh, that reminds me of a wonderful time where I'm remembering the shadows and the sound of aspen leaves in the fall, or that reminds me of, how the texture of bark feels or stones. So hopefully that makes sense. So the message would be that I want people to feel some kind of connection and interaction with the natural world.
I love that. And I think I think you do that very well in your art pieces. So let's talk about education, because how are we educating young people, children especially, because that's a great place where you have a tremendous amount of influence. How do you impart to a kid at any age, actually, that everybody's an artist in some way? Everybody is a creator. Everybody can reach that. Because I hear a lot of people say, oh, I'm not creative, or I'm not an artist. But as a professional artist, you instinctively know that place comes from somewhere. And how do you teach that to children?
I feel like, there, like I said before, there needs to be the urge to do it, or the obsession with it, or something like that. But, I think there's a balance between trying to teach skills and then also trying to listen to people and have them be able to think about what ideas do I have and how am I going to use these skills that I am learning to show something or communicate or tell people things. So I think an openness about that, but then also, you can do that in a bunch of different ways, as a writer or as a poet or as there's all the million different ways of expressing and communicating with people. And with art instruction, you also really are trying to teach people how to use tools and different mediums. So there's a balance in there of, you do need to learn how clay works, or you do need to understand how a camera works so you can take the picture that you want to take. Or you do need to understand how paint mixes. So there is a very physical, technical part to teaching, but then there's also the idea part where you're really trying to teach people about how do you tell something through an image or an object.
What kind of responses do you get from kids when they come into an art class and they don't have the confidence or they don't know how to express themselves? And how do you kind of bring them out of that and help them like find a path where they can open up?
Yeah, and so I think it is a lot. I mean, there's so many different ways to, talk about ideas. And so I think really, helping people, I think, when you're really young, what you're trying to do is learn how to hold a pencil or use scissors to cut things. And so, you want to get people comfortable with the tools that they're using. So I think a lot of showing and demonstrating and then, practicing, on part of the student, but then also the sort of reminding that you're not going to get it right the first time, that there needs to be a lot of practice. There's a reason why artists refer to art making as their practice, because you do constantly need to practice it, just as you might need to practice singing, or you might want to athletes do it, they're practicing. So I think it is a great term when artists refer to, oh, this is my art practice, because I need to keep doing it so that I can get better. And then it will, I'll be able to know how to do the thing that I want to say visually.
No, I think that's an excellent answer. I think there's this attitude that sometimes you're just naturally a good drawer or naturally a good painter or naturally a good something. And I think there is some of that. But then what you were saying is the practice. So you might be good at it, but if you don't practice it, you won't become better at it.
Right, exactly. And if you're not obsessed with it, then you don't feel like practicing it, and you'll be obsessed with something else. You'll be really good at making pizza dough, which is also really important.
I can attest to that.
I feel like there are a couple of funny things happening. Sometimes I think there's a period of time in education where kids like either are told they can't do something, or they internalize that they can't do something, and then it sort of gets shut down. But then there's also, they might end up realizing that there's some other thing that they're totally obsessed with. Like, we have a lot of athletes in this community, and you have to be really obsessed and do a lot of practicing to, excel pretty much at anything you're doing. So, yeah.
I think that's a great way to put it. I love your word obsession, because it's what we all do in whatever we do. It's like it becomes what you are obsessed to. That's what you gravitate towards. And it might not be, creating a piece of art. It might, like you said, it might be, being the best runner or football player or whatever. But it really is what you spend time doing. And let's talk about the starving artist. Right? Let's talk about the starving artist. There's this thing in culture and society that if you're an artist, you're starving.
I know.
How do we just break that down and break it apart and get rid of that? Because I don't believe in that. I
don't believe in it either.
No, I think it is the obsession. If you want to do it, then do it successfully. So one thing I've learned, being an artist myself, but just that whole idea of a starving artist, if you're an artist, then you're starving, whatever. But how do artists make that connection to the business world?
I know that is such I'm like, somebody's probably written a whole dissertation on this. No, I think it is a very antiquated way of thinking about artists. I feel like more contemporarily, artists have found a million different ways to be creative, and it can go in so many directions throughout. You can just look at, our world right now, is so visually rich, as one word, busy, as, like we are consuming things as people that are made by other people that are creative all the time, daily. So I feel really open about the way I think about creativity, and that people are going to find the thing that they are obsessed with and do it. And they're going to find ways of supporting themselves through, different outlets, whether it's, through, you could name a million things. There's the whole creative world of advertising and of product design and of videos that we're watching. I feel like people are constantly making things and putting them out to the world. And so it's really nice that way. There's not just one path or one way that says, oh, I'm a painter, therefore I have to be in a gallery. There's also the academia thing. I am a X kind of creative person, therefore the way that I need to make my living is to teach at the college level. Like, I think there are so many different ways of finding your path with creativity and the thing that you make, that it's really nice and exciting. And so you can apply yourself to so many different areas.
I think that is so true, that we get stuck. We get stuck in boxes. I always think about how we label people, or we label art, or we label a certain thing, and then we kind of like ruminate in that place. But I like to learn how or who inspires you, maybe on a daily basis, to create differently or do something different. Who are the artists that have inspired you in your work?
I know, when I read that question that you had sent me earlier, I always have a really hard time answering that because I have so many different things that influence me. So I would say there's a bunch of different things daily. I love having an artist community that, we have in this town. I love making things daily. Sometimes it's in our studio spaces at the Art Association. Sometimes it's at home. So I love having a community of people that I can bounce ideas off of, or I like to do things quietly, and then I'll show things to people and talk to them about it. But I think I was saying a little bit before in some of the earlier, about I'm really inspired with my work about how I move through the natural world. So those are the things that really get me. And then I try to figure out how to say it. I am hungry all the time to look at people's work and to think about what they're trying to express. So I'm constantly trying to look at work made by artists, contemporary and historical, and think about why they're doing what they're doing, and how I sort of fit into that big picture. So I can't really say one particular thing, but I think creating a community and really hammering through just with myself, what are my subjects that really keep me going? So all of those things.
No, that's great. I often think, and maybe it's just me, but one of the hardest things about being an artist is your family. Like, what do you do? What are you doing? What do you do for a living? Like, what? I don't understand. You're creating this thing. I don't get it. Or maybe they do get it. But how does being an artist affect family life? Because it's kind of fluid when you're an artist. You're flowing all the time. How does that relate in your family relations?
That is interesting. Let's see. I would say, in terms of my family, my parents and my brother, they are all really creative. And I think some of the play that I play with different mediums I got from my dad, because he, has tried a lot of things and is very accomplished at different things, but then settled on being a potter. My brother is a fiction writer and a screenplay writer and very creative. And my mom is very creative and has been, and is a really good writer, but also a really amazing, really, really into food and how we grow it. And she started a bunch of CSAs and is a really good cook, and also works with people that way. So I feel like in my growing up, I was always encouraged to be an artist and be creative. I'm married, have a husband and a 13-year-old son, and my life with them it does flow. We are problem solving constantly, or thinking about how to, work with. My husband does a lot of woodworking and is also, creative that way, and really a curious person. So we are actually thinking about problem solving mediums a lot in our house, and it does fit really well. We have we have a million tools and a million art supplies in our house. And so we're able to, at a drop of just be like, yep, I have that pen you need, or I have all that paper you need to make whatever project we're thinking about, or we have these kinds of woodworking tools. So I think that is hopefully answering that question.
No, I think that is so cool and unusual. It's not an everyday thing that, your parents are artists, so they get you.
Yep.
And so that translates to how you operate and create in your own home, personal environment. And I just wish everybody had that kind of opportunity. I'm sure you think that too, when you think about how young people grow up and what's available to them. And do they have the tools and the opportunity to have a self-expression?
Yeah. And that's what I think is really important, is just having things available for people, for kids or for adults. I feel like I also see a lot of adults through my work with education and the Art Association that are coming to something later in life or in mid, that it needs to be an open enough environment so that people feel comfortable enough to experiment and to learn how to do something through practice. So, yeah, I think it's really being able to identify and just making things available to people so that they feel comfortable so they can learn.
Yeah, I think the comfortable part is really the key word in that sentence, because a lot of times people don't feel comfortable creating. I mean, kids do. I get that. Yeah. But as you grow older, just like it's hard to learn a new language as you grow older, there is just a part of your brain that develops. And when you think about it, and your brain is a muscle, and you think about how people learn other languages, it's work, it's hard. Yeah. And I think you do that as an artist. You
yes.
develop that. And so you're very fortunate to have all that just kind of working in your life. Good for you. I love that. I love hearing that. And you should write a book.
You're funny. Oh, well, what I've really been interested in, the past few years is how I don't even think how good using your hands and your brain, and your whole physical body and your eyes to make things. It's important for someone who is in, whatever level they're picking, whatever they're trying to express in their world, but also for people who are new to art making. It's really all of the studies that are coming out is so amazing how good using, your physical self to make things is. So it also, on a totally other thing in terms of education, it's just really good for you to make things, even if it's just for yourself.
I absolutely agree with that, because in this world and in this day and age, we do so much on the computer, and you get to the end of the computer and you're just like, I need to go outside and do something physical, because you get just in the computer and it gets really tiring. Yeah.
And I would say that for especially what we're doing daily, that's like whatever it is, communicating with people through email or through Zoom or that sort of thing. I do feel like the computer is an incredible tool for making art. And that, I think, is a very different thing from, using computers daily to conduct life is very different than using it as an artistic tool.
No, that's a good point. I agree completely. When you use it as an artistic tool, that's one thing. And I get that part of it. But when you use it every day to just communicate with people and do emails and, do all the things you need to do for business, and I feel like it's a drain. And then you need to go do something physical. Do a piece of art, go draw. Okay, you just inspired me. I'm going to just do something, because I was thinking about that. I was like, oh my gosh, that is so cool that you have all these tools in your home available. When you get sick of the computer, because you do so much work on the computer, you can just walk away and start drawing something or start working with clay or
I also feel like I know this. I really love to cook. So I also feel like sometimes, making food is a similar, like you're using your hands, you're using your senses, your smell, all kinds of things to cook dinner. And that I think also is a really interesting way of using your physical self to do things. So.
Oh my gosh, Bronwyn, I so agree with that because my husband says, Emmy, why are you making this big dinner? Or what are you doing? Because I'm always trying new recipes because I want to just get away from the computer, go into my kitchen and create something different. And I'll research recipes, or I'll research a sauce, because every time I make a roast, it's different. Or every time I do a spaghetti recipe, it's different. And because it is that. It's like you just want to get away from all the technical stuff just to use your hands, think about your senses, and enjoy something. And I love, like you, I love eating. I love being in the kitchen cooking and figuring out new stuff. I think that's so cool.
Yeah, I think it's really, I love, chopping vegetables is really relaxing. It's really good for you.
It is so good for you. I agree. I was talking to a friend of mine and she said, people don't understand, but cleaning her house is Zen.
Yep, that's her thing.
Yeah. And it's like, I get that because you just leave the world of everything else, stress and all that stuff. And you're just like vacuuming or mopping or just being in a place where you're not having this kind of stress. It's kind of releasing it.
I like that. It's good.
I know. Cleaning house is Zen. Okay. That's an interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's been great talking to you today, and have a beautiful rest of your day.
You too. This was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bronwyn. Thank you for joining us for this episode of What's Your Why? Brought to you by Wyoming Humanities with support from Wyoming Community Foundation and generous supporters like you. To learn more, go to thinkwhy.org, subscribe, and never miss a show.